Please listen carefully.
Hello, universe. Welcome to the Optimist Daily Update. I'm Summers McKay.
And I'm Kristy Jansen, and we are part of the team behind the Optimist Daily, making solutions the news. We bring you reader-funded solutions news every day in order to change the tenor of news media, social media, and the direction of your day to help make it one focused on solutions.
7 days a week, we publish positive news stories written by award-winning worldwide journalists and delivered online to your inboxes through our social channels. And also, we are sharing these solutions in a commute-worthy, walk-worthy, home office-worthy, Monday-worthy podcast. Today is, in fact, Monday, the 2nd of August, 2021. Hey, Kristy, happy birthday month.
Haha, thank you. Well, and tomorrow's my actual day, so we'll just put a pin in that and let's ignore it for this year.
You know what? We'll COVID quarantine your birthday for the year and we'll acknowledge it next month. That's fine. Well, everybody, I know that we said we'd follow up on the Optimist Daily Challenge and how Kristy and I did with not doing single-use plastic for the weekend, but you're going to have to wait for that until tomorrow. Because today we are going to have a really, really exciting interview with a person who has figured out some fun ways to gamify climate solutions. On Friday, we were talking about the purpose of storytelling and meeting together and using arts and music in advancing a conversation on how to make this world a better place. And a couple weeks ago, we wrote a daily story on Sam Levac-Levey, who has created a game called Solutions. Well, he reached out to us. And sometimes it's really fun when that happens, because when the game creator themselves reaches out to us, or the writer or the innovator reaches out to us, then we right away ask them if we can put them on the Optimist Daily Update. So today we have Sam Levac-Levey, who is calling in from Nova Scotia, Canada, to talk to us about Solutions, the game. Hello, Sam. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing really, really well. I'm so happy to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. Now, let's talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea for the Climate Solutions board game.
Definitely. And before that, I just wanted to say that I absolutely adore The Optimist. I've been a reader for many, many years right now, and I always love recommending you guys to. I see all the time people getting so depressed by all the news and the mainstream media, and especially like my grandmother's always watching the news, and so I'm always recommending people. You're really happy you guys exist.
Question, were you surprised when you saw the story written about you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was kind of like my ideal place to have a story about the game. I can't think of a more perfect pair, because the game's called Solutions and you guys are all about solutions.
And I love it. And you, I think, were inspired by Project Drawdown, which is definitely given us inspiration. We've written a lot about the solutions that are featured there. And I can't wait to hear about how you intersected with that project and got involved. But tell me a little, let's start by introducing yourself, Sam, and tell our audience who you are and what you're doing in Nova Scotia right now. This whole project.
So yeah, my background's actually mechanical engineering, so nothing to do with making games whatsoever. And I've been pretty fortunate to gain a wide range of experiences in engineering, from internships and contract work, including, for example, I worked on rockets at SpaceX, where I was working on the Octaweb, which is the giant aluminum structure that combines the 9 rocket engines to the rest of the rocket. I worked at Tesla, where I was working on large-scale grid energy storage with the power pack inverter. I worked on electric flying cars in Germany at Lilium Aviation, and I worked on drones, electric boats, renewable energy, a bunch of different things. And so, and I've also done a few different things in entrepreneurship and venture capital as well. But really the journey for me with this game started, I guess, honestly, in grade 4, when I first became really, really keenly aware and passionate about, I wouldn't say the climate back then, but the environment, which has since really transitioned to the climate as a whole. And I remember one day in that grade 4 class, we had our teacher just had us come in and sit in silence for 1 minute and look at the clock. And we just looked at the clock and watched the seconds tick by with no idea whatsoever why. And at the end of that minute, she just kind of quietly said, all right, kids, well, in that minute, X amount of the tropical rainforest was just cut down. X amount of acres. I don't remember the exact number. But that just struck me so much, and I just couldn't stop looking back at the clock every few minutes throughout the rest of the day. And since then, I've just been super passionate about the environment and the climate. You were asking about the origin story for the game, and really it did start with the Drawdown book. Drawdown's a book that came out in 2017, and it was, I mean, it's probably at this point one of my favorite books of all time. It's this amazing compilation of all these really tangible and often surprising solutions to the climate crisis. And what I really love about it is when most people think about climate solutions, myself included at that point, you think of the standard things that you always see, like electric cars or solar panels. And those are really, really important solutions, and they're in there. But in this book, there was just so much more. And there was a ton to do with food, agriculture, materials, and just some really wacky things that people don't normally think about. And the great thing about it was that some of these wacky and surprising solutions are often surprisingly impactful. And so I would just flip through the Drawdown book and kind of brainstorm, well, how can I fit into this solution? How can I fit into this one? And in September 2019, I flew out to their first ever conference in Penn State and had an amazing time. I was just really impressed with like how the researchers would field all these really tough questions from a really educated audience and just how well they knew their research and the solutions and what was going on. And at the end of the session, we held what we called an unconference, which was basically the attendees coming together and brainstorming ourselves on what we can do about climate change. Now, one of the attendees happened to be Hank Rogers, who's the entrepreneur behind Tetris. And he, of course, ran a session on the gamification of Drawdown, and he suggested, well, all right, why don't we turn Drawdown into a card game? And I heard him say that, and I was just immediately like, no, this makes so much more sense as a board game. I was starting to brainstorm the rules on the spot. And so I ended up talking to Hank, talking to someone on the Drawdown team, and they were like, yeah, you can go ahead and do this. And so here I am 2 years later.
I love that. And I love that it was Hank Rogers. You know, Tetris is one of the most addictive games out there, right? I don't know if you've ever got lost playing it for hours. And the idea of turning this into a game that can draw you in, but also draw you out. I love the board game idea because that is something you can do it in a family setting or in a classroom setting even. And I think that's part of what this game that you've put together, one of your groups that you're marketing it to or is inviting classrooms to take the game. And it's learning, but also playing.
I think that it's interesting. You shared the difference between it, that it's a card game versus a board game.
Yeah.
And it's funny because on some of the stuff that I've read about it calls it a board game. Some of the stuff it says it's a card game. Just for those of us who don't know and haven't had time to play Cards Against Humanity, what is a card game versus a board game, and how is it more portable, and why might it be better for kids or classes?
Definitely. I mean, there are a lot of cards in the board game, and I'd say it's a very card-centric board game. Really, the only difference between a card game and a board game would be like the card game would be only cards. So you mentioned Cards Against Humanity, and that's a game, you get your box and you open it, and you have a bunch of cards, and all the game is contained within those cards. For solutions, I thought it was really important to have a board, some dice, some other pieces that really kind of helped you along on the journey, makes it visual. For example, on the game board, we have a giant thermometer that's kind of the centerpiece. And when you're playing the cards in the game, a lot of what you're trying to do. So basically, you're moving forwards through time, and there's a time track on the board. And as you move forwards through time, you need to play all these climate solutions, which are on cards, as a team in order to bring temperatures down. And so temperatures are constantly increasing as you move forwards in time. You're under this constant pressure and tension of the temperature increasing, and then you're going to come together, play these cards, and try and keep the thermometer cool.
And I think that's really very ingenious, as you related when you were in fourth grade, having that clock to watch and watching it tick, and then being able to relate that to this many acres going away. I mean, you get that urgency and that sense of movement on the board. And I know with, playing with kids, I mean, I have a son and I have other kids I've spent time with. It's so neat to have dice and being able to move, whereas the card games is a little bit more cerebral and may not be as accessible for younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things there I'll say on the dice is I tried to be really careful here, because I think in board games, luck is an important element. But I really tried to match up luck in the game to luck in real life. So, for example, one of the kind of nasty side effects of climate change is the warmer the world gets, the more likely we are to have feedback loops. For example, the warmer the world gets, the more ice melts and the more permafrost melts, which releases a bunch of methane and CO2 and honestly ancient viruses out into the atmosphere. There will be a tipping point at some point once we've reached a certain temperature, but no one really knows exactly when. We just know it's going to become more likely the warmer the world gets. So it's the same thing in the game. As the temperature gets warmer, you're going to roll a dice, and you're going to be more and more likely to get some of these effects the higher up on the thermometer you are.
So it's interesting to think about the different solutions. I love the game and I love how it works, but I want to know some of the solutions that you've come up with, and you've obviously done a tremendous amount of research to validate these solutions. What are some of the solutions in solutions?
So we have 76 core solutions in the game, and we're going to end up with either a bit under 100 or possibly even more. So actually, we're on Kickstarter right now, and through the Kickstarter, people have the opportunity to propose solutions and vote on which ones make it into the game. So we are actually still we still have a bit more wiggle room to add some cool stuff from whoever's a backer. But yeah, we have such a diverse range of solutions in the game. Like I mentioned before, we of course have all your usual culprits, your wind turbines, solar panels, electric cars, all super important and in there. But there's a lot in terms of agriculture and food. So reducing food waste, I'd say, is one of the most honestly shockingly impactful solutions. And we have, for example, efficient ocean shipping. Rice is one that stands out particularly to me. We actually have 2 solutions that have to do with rice in the game, and you would never think about rice as a climate solution. But in reality, over 3 billion people rely on rice as a staple food. And the production of rice, the way it's often done, releases a ton of methane, which is about 34 times worse than CO2 over 100 years, 80 times worse over 20 years. So actually rice can have a pretty big climate impact, and there's things we can do to mitigate that and to fix that.
Like what?
There's 2 specific solutions in the game. So one is the system of rice intensification, and that is a particular sustainable approach to rice cultivation that can actually increase the yields per plot of land by about 50 to 100%, and also decrease the water needed by 25 to 50%. And doing this also helps the soil absorb more carbon from the atmosphere, and it lowers the amount of methane emissions that are put into the atmosphere.
Brilliant.
I loved it. So I love the like nitty gritty tactical solutions like that where, people don't even think about that rice, is such a widely produced and used product that it has an impact as well. And that food and agriculture need to be solved. But there are also some sort of crazier solutions, right?
Yeah. What's your favorite solution, Sam?
They are. So we have a special class of solutions in the game that are kind of crazy out there solutions, and definitely some of my favorites are in that. Many people will be familiar with the Hyperloop, for example, which is a controversial solution, but we include these controversial solutions in that class of solution because we actually, with these crazy solutions, because no one necessarily fully knows if they're going to work or not, we actually, again, bring luck back into it. Where you're again going to have a luck element as to if these crazier solutions actually work or not. But we included them in the game because I think it's really important to have that aspect. All right, the main solutions in the game are really concrete. They're real. You can do them now. But what's on the horizon? What can inspire people for the future to work on? And I think definitely one of my favorite solutions is cloning woolly mammoths because it's honestly a bit crazy. And just to explain a bit.
Let's talk about why we want to clone woolly mammoths, other than Ice Age the movie, but why?
Just so you know, Sam, we've written about this solution also on the Optimist Daily a few years ago. So I love it, and I want you to tell us how would woolly mammoths help to cure the climate? So
you guys might know more about it than me, but basically, I mentioned permafrost earlier, and permafrost is frozen ground in the Arctic, Siberia, cold regions, and the top 3 feet of permafrost alone is estimated to contain twice as much carbon as what's already in the Earth's atmosphere, which is just kind of staggering to think about. And as the world gets warmer, the permafrost is starting to melt more and more. And in the permafrost, like I mentioned before, you're releasing CO2, you're releasing methane, and there's also ancient viruses locked up in the permafrost as well, which is a bit scary to think about.
Yeah, I would say viruses are not the world's favorite thing right now.
No, and we have newfound sensitivity to terrifying viruses defrosting from thousands of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically right now in the winter, the ground in much of these areas is covered by really thick layers of fluffy snow. And that snow kind of acts as a blanket to the permafrost. And it actually insulates the permafrost from the cold Arctic air above it. And
so it's like an igloo on top of the permafrost, basically.
Yeah. And so the thing is, back in the day when woolly mammoths were around, the woolly mammoths would topple trees, trample the snow, and this would kind of allow grasses to grow, which allowed an actual ecosystem in these regions where you have animals, deer, elk. But when you had all this massive animals, they would trample the snow down to a thin layer, and this would allow for much deeper freezing of the permafrost in the winter. Mm-hmm. And basically, the idea is if you can bring the woolly mammoth back or simulate it, then you can actually prevent the permafrost from melting, or at least delay it from melting, where instead of melting at X degrees, now it will melt at warmer temperatures. So we're giving ourselves a bigger buffer. And you can see how this could have a tremendous impact in giving us hope of this not happening. And
well, I love the ideas of woolly mammoths coming back, I think I saw, a meme on social media that was, Jurassic Park isn't a movie about how science went wrong. Science went right. Humans just didn't do so well with it. So there is a bit of a risk with bringing back the woolly mammoths.
But talk about like a keystone species, right? We've written about that and rewilding. That would be sort of rewilding the permafrost.
Rewilding permafrost, a woolly mammoth solution. I love it. I think the Optimist Daily Update should sponsor that part on the Kickstarter. So, question, Sam, obviously you want a lot of players to play this game, but really, what do you hope they'll get out of it, and who is your target audience?
Sure. So I'll start with the first part. So what I'd love for them to get out of it. And honestly, I'm pretty transparent of that because it's in the subtitle of the game. So the subtitle is Discover, Prioritize, and Take Action. And what I mean by discover, I think, is pretty clear based on what we've talked about. I want people to discover these new and surprising solutions that they've never heard about before. So that's step one. Number two is prioritize. And really what I mean by that is a lot of the point of the game and my design intention behind the game was to get people to really think critically and engage meaningfully with each solution. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of games out there that have really incredible themes, but the theme doesn't really matter to the gameplay. To give an example, one of the most popular board games in the world, and one of my favorite board games, is called Terraforming Mars. And I absolutely love this board game. You're actually trying to cause climate change on Mars to make it happen. Amazing game, and they have these incredibly creative cards. You're like hurtling asteroids into Mars's atmosphere to like use friction to warm it up, or all these crazy things. But the magic of their cards does not matter whatsoever to the gameplay. All that matters is that this card says, all right, do +1 this, -2 this. And I love that game, but my goal here was to do the opposite. And if you're going to play one of these magical climate solutions, you're going to need to think critically about it, engage meaningfully with it, and that's really done through discussion and through the game mechanics. And then the third thing is take action. And there's kind of like a dual meaning there because obviously you want to take action in the game. Like the point of the game is taking action to play your cards and lower the temperature and win the game. But one of my hopes is that it doesn't stop with playing the game. The hope is that once you play the game, you can pick your favorite solution and actually do something about it. So we've tested the game on over 600 people at this point, and we've tested it on students from middle school, high school, university, elementary school, PhD level. We've tested on people in the general public who have no particular background or interest in climate generally. But one particular thing we've seen is with schools, they've been really excited to kind of take these projects further. And to give you an example, we sent the game to a school in Palm Beach, Florida, and they had 2 of their grade 6 classes play the game. And both of them happened to flip over the reduced food waste card, which, as I mentioned before, is one of the most shockingly impactful solutions. Mm-hmm. And both the classes independently decided to do class projects reducing food waste in their school cafeteria. And there's actually, their local news station picked up the story, and there's this great video where you can see the kids dragging this giant garbage bag of food waste, plopping it onto a scale, weighing it, and they've managed to reduce their food waste by about 3 kilograms a day, and they're looking to expand that next year. Not only that, but the kids doing this, they did a presentation to the faculty at the school, and it inspired the faculty to bring back a school garden that they used to have, and also to start a composting program.
This just makes me feel like I'm tearing up.
It's really, really sweet. I mean, it's wonderful community building and thought building and action taking. And it's so inspiring.
And think of those children who now have that experience. And I'm sure that they went home and told their parents about it. And, all of them it's like it has a ripple effect out into the world.
Definitely. And someone was telling me how this affected smoking, because I've had several anecdotes now of people telling me how, like, the only way their parents ended up doing something about smoking, no amount of government ads or seeing the diseased lungs on the backs of the cigarette packs or whatever, none of that does anything. But what actually gets people to change and what gets them to quit smoking is their kids, and it's their children begging them to do something about it because they care. And so I hope that will be the case for the game also.
This is so wonderful. And the last thing in the mantra is, or I guess it's not the last, but it's in the mantra of the board game, is prioritize, right? And one of the things that I struggle with because we have our own Optimist Daily Solutions Challenge game that we are playing. And
this week we're trying to not use single-use plastics. That's our challenge right now.
The prioritization of single-use plastics over, in my case, I am parenting a toddler. And so going and buying huge bulk carrots from Costco does me no good, because then I'm going to have 80% food waste. So knowing that it is a balance, that solutions are not siloed, that they all work together. And I love the fact that you see this as sort of a tapestry of success and it's affecting communities. Now, you're in the middle of a Kickstarter. Is that correct, right? 15 days to go? Is that where you're at? What do you want folks to, what's kind of the sell on Kickstarter? Are people pledging to support schools? How do you want our audience to participate in your Kickstarter?
The purpose behind the Kickstarter is to really make the game a reality. And so we've developed a ton of these one-off prototypes that we've been sending out to these schools and playtesting and sending out to people. But the prototypes are one-off copies, so they're very expensive, and basically no one in the real world would want to buy them.
Right.
So the goal of the Kickstarter is to raise enough money to do a proper manufacturing run and make the game at a reasonable price. And we've actually achieved that initial goal, which is amazing. We were actually fully funded within the first 24 hours, which was a great feeling. And now we are trying to take things further. And so basically there's several different ways that you can help support us on the Kickstarter. Of course, you can buy a copy of the game itself, and we're actually it's about a 20% discount to the retail price there. And so that's a kind of a way of us saying thank you for supporting us in these early stages. If you love the idea of the game, but you're not a board game person, you don't want it for yourself, you can also donate a copy to a school in need. And we're working with some pretty cool partners there.
That was the one that I liked a lot. That's the one I'm going to do. Is I don't foresee in the very near future that solution working in my household, but I would love to send this to schools. I think that is just brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. And we also, specifically for schools, we have an educator's edition, and there we actually have a lesson plan developed by one of our partners, Climate Science, and they've developed this kind of very visual, interactive lesson plan that kind of matches with the game and helps teachers fit it into their classrooms. A bunch of different things. You can even sponsor a solution if there's a solution that you think should be in the game.
Well, there's a lot of ways people can participate. Hey, Kristy, do you want to ask our final question that we normally ask? We could keep going for a while, but I think we should wrap up and take it home.
Sam, I feel so inspired by your mission on this, and I love that you took the time and energy, and that it's gone as well as it's gone so far for you. And I'm so excited to see how it develops, and we want to stay in touch. But before we end, we always like to ask our guests for them to tell us, what is it right now that's making you optimistic? I mean, we're the Optimist Daily, right? We want to know where are you finding your optimism?
I think for me, climate is a really interesting problem because it's really easy to be down about it, and there's all this negative news, and it's all real, and it's all serious, and I don't want to sugarcoat any of that, and to make it even more serious, like climate really is an exponential problem because we have these feedback loops, and the warmer the world gets, not only can these feedback loops occur that can make it even warmer, also a lot of the natural processes that help keep our climate in balance, and the phytoplankton, the trees, can get less effective as the world gets warmer. So it's really an exponential problem, and really honestly scary. But what I'd like to really get across with this game is that the solutions to climate are also exponential. And I mean that in a bunch of different ways. First of all, everyone's familiar with the fact that technology is exponential. You look at Moore's law, but it's not just Moore's law. It's we're building on previous knowledge. And so as we're coming up with new solutions, as we're improving on previous solutions, if you look at how like solar panels and wind turbines and electric cars have improved across the years, these solutions are getting exponentially better as well. And it's not just the technology solutions. Beyond that, I really think that social change is exponential in itself. And there's this really great rule, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, called the 3.5% rule. And I won't get too far into it. I'll let people look it up. You can find it easily. But at its core, it's saying that no government has withstood a challenge of more than 3.5% of their population mobilizing for change.
Right.
And that doesn't mean I'm like advocating for like an uprising or anything like that. What I'm trying to get at here is that it only takes a shockingly small percentage of people to really care and really be active in order to get sweeping social change. And that's because when you reach that 3.5% mark, it means pretty much everyone at least knows someone that's really involved and really cares.
Right.
And so
it's the trim tab effect.
Yeah.
Where you just make this change and then the whole ship starts turning.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think really what gives me hope is that, yes, climate is an exponential problem, but the solutions are exponential as well. And so really we're in a race of exponentials, and it's up to us to see which exponentials win out. So that's awesome. Good.
That's very, very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Good luck with the rest of the Kickstarter. Sam, we loved having this conversation, and we look forward to seeing where it goes and how it grows and all the lives it positively impacts. Well done. And everybody, thank you for listening to the Optimist Daily Update. We promise to continue to share positive, solution-based stories with ideas on how you can participate in this changing world and ensure it is changed for the good. If you haven't already, please consider becoming an emissary on the optimistdaily.com. That is how we are funded. But do head over to Kickstarter and check out Solutions the Game on Kickstarter. Sam, anywhere else we can follow you or find out more?
The best place to find out more is to go on solutionsthegame.com. We're also on various social media channels, the usual suspect, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, @solutionsthegame.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody, and thank you, Sam. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday, guys.